Hi, welcome to Time for Mishna and our session on how to remember what you learn. Today's session, we focus on Simanim, specifically Mishna Simanim. So before we get into the topic of Simanim, let's talk about memory. I've dealt with lots of people on the topic of memory. I've trained people, I do seminars and so on. And I found that there's a major misconception that people have about memory. And it's very important that we get past this before we learn any specific technique about memory and how to maximize what we accomplish in our learning. We have to get rid of a very important misconception. And that is, I believe, a major misconception is that people think if you can't remember everything, you can't remember anything. I've just met scores of people that think, oh, I sat through a shir and I don't remember that much. I can't remember it all, so therefore I don't have a good memory. They set the bar extremely high, that unless you have like a photographic memory or ability to retain everything you hear, then your memory is just not so good. And therefore, there's really very little point in putting effort into things because you just don't have a good memory. So they think if you can't remember everything, you can't remember anything. And I believe there's some good news on the horizon, and that is the reality is if you can remember anything, you can ultimately remember everything. If you can remember anything, you can eventually remember everything. You just have to do it step by step. And everybody here, and you're listening, you know a lot, you can remember a lot from your life and things you've done. If you can remember anything, you can ultimately remember everything. You just have to do it systematically, right? So just like if you're going to build a building, you wouldn't bring, on the first day of construction, you wouldn't bring everything to the site. You wouldn't bring all the beams and the tractors and the digging up and the wallpaper and the wiring and the telephones and the computers. You're not going to bring everything at once because that's just not feasible. That's not the way you work. You do it systematically. And if you build one step at a time, it's amazing what you can accomplish. And therefore, I think you're going to find in this program, Time for Mishna, if you just do things step by step and you can remember anything from your learning, telling you that means you can remember everything. You have the capacity. You just have to do it a step by step in a systematic way. So one way to do that is with Simanim. So I want to introduce the concept of Simanim. So here we go. Simanim, Torah introduces it in Devarim, very near the end of the Chumash. We have Moshe ben told Bata, now write down this shira, this song. Teach it to Bnei Israel, v'sima b'fihem, put it in their mouths. Now, how is it possible to put all the Torah, all Torah Sheba'al Peh, in someone's mouth? I mean, things you learn, word by word, you memorize, that's one thing, but everything you should know in learning, the goal is not to know it word by word. So how do you put it in their mouth? So the Gemara tells us, al tikra sima, put el simana. You put your learning in through simanim. And simanim literally means like a marker or a filing, a label for a file. And you organize your learning with simanim. And I just want to point out, this isn't, happens to be a nice trite idea of organizing your learning by creating markers. And the Chumash just happens to have a remiss to it the Gemara discusses. But in the Gemara and Shabbos and Daf Kuf Dalet, it goes through the meaning of the Aleph base, because we know the letters of the Aleph base were used to create the world that we live in. Just those letters were used to create all of reality. So the Gemara identifies what's the essential nature, the function of each letter. So Aleph is Aleph and base is Aleph Bina, teach understanding. Gimel and Dalet is Gomel Dalim, bestow kindness on those who are impoverished, and so on. It gets to Samach and Ayin, and the Gemara in Shabbos tells us the letters Samach and Ayin are there to tell us Simanim Aseh, make Simanim. So this isn't some nice add-on to your learning seder, but the Gemara is clearly telling us that somehow embedded in reality itself through the letters of Samach and Ayin that you should make these simanim. So they're obviously very, very powerful and something that resonate with the way that we have been created. So just keep that in mind. So I want to go through in this session the 4 benefits of making simanim, making these markers, so you can understand it. And then in a subsequent session, we'll go through exactly how to do it. Although you'll see from what I present now, you're going to see a lot of how to do it, but I'll have a more specific session on the how-tos and mistakes people make when they make simanim. So here we go. So benefit number one is a Simin gives you a filing system for your learning. So I have here Maseches Yoma as an example, the first parak. And if we just take it's called Mafresh Kohen Gadol, it talks about the Kohen Gadol being separated for 7 days prior to Yom Kippur, preparing and practicing the avoda. And we have, it says Hachana preparation, we have 8 Mishnayos. So what a Simin is that we learn the Mishnah, and then we just come up with a title, a label for that Mishnah. So the first Mishnah talks about being separated for 7 days, so I called it Mafreshim, separation. And then in Mishnah base, it talks about the avoda, the service he does every single day. So I call that avoda. Okay, a one-word title, that's a label. But now I have a place in my brain, as I write it down on paper and commit it to paper, to my memory, I should say. Now I have a file in my brain. The first Mishnah, I'm going to call Mafreshim. The second one's called the avoda that he does the 7 days to practice. And then we have what he reads every day to practice the understanding the avoda that he has to go through. And the Mishnah Dalet talks about what he can eat, the machal, he can eat the food he can eat the 7 days, and then how he changes his eating on Erev Yom Kippur. And then the Mishnah Hey, I call it Mashpia, talks about an oath that's taken, and so on and so on. Those are the 8 Simanim I have for Maseches Yoma. So now what the Simin has given me is a file. So unfortunately for most people, many people in learning, the moment they pick up their head from the Daf or the Mishnah or the Chumash, it starts to fade away. So if I ask you, hey, what did you learn yesterday or today or the day before or last week? So they have to fish around in their brain, and where did all that learning go? It just went somewhere, like to the back with all the other clutter. And the Simanim helps you declutter your brain by organizing and giving you a finding system so you can find things. Oh, where is the Mishnah that talks about what the Kohen does the 7 days prior to Yom Kippur, the avoda? Oh, that's the second Mishnah. I have a filing system. So that's benefit number one. Then benefit number two is they help you organize your learning beyond just having a filing, a label to know where to look, but it helps you organize the material and focus on the organization. So for example, in this parak that we just went through, so even though we have 8 Mishnayos, many people would just, okay, I've got my 8 Mishnayos and this is what they talked about, but really the goal is to be masada your learning, to organize what goes together, what's the beginning of a new concept, how would you break it down? So with Simanim, it gives you an easy way to start to think about what's the organization. So for example, here, you have the first 3 Mishnayos that talk about the 7 days prior to Yom Kippur. So these 3 Mishnayos talk about what the Kohen Gadol does the 7 days prior. Okay, so they kind of go together as a unit. And then from the middle of Mishnah Gimel until the end of Mishnah Hey, it talks about what he does Erev Yom Kippur and changes and things he has to do. And then from Mishnah Vav all the way to Ches, it talks about Leil Yom Kippur, the night of Yom Kippur, before the actual avoda begins in the day, what he does throughout the night. So I've got a basic breakdown of the parak into smaller units, and now I'm starting to organize material there, because it's not just a pile of 8 Mishnayos, but it's actually a presentation of the Kohen Gadol from the 7 days prior to Yom Kippur all the way through Erev Yom Kippur to the night of Yom Kippur, and now I see how the Mishnayos are organized. So Simanim give you a very good handle on what's in the parak, so you can start to organize it into smaller chunks and develop your Havana, your understanding of the parak, even better. So that's benefit number 2. They help you organize your learning. But then there's a third benefit. The third benefit is that Simanim help you see the Masechta as a whole. So you not just have a filing system and you're not just organizing the parak, but now with the entire Masechta, you can see how it's organized. So we can say, I'm just going to put these lines here. These are the basic chunks. The first parak deals with the preparation. Then we have 4 lotteries. And then parak Gimel all the way through parak Zayin deals with the actual avoda of the Kohen Gadol on the day of Yom Kippurim. And then the last parak is the different fasts. And then we have all the different Mishnayos. So here we have Simanim, but now I can see the entire Masechta as a whole on one single page. So now if I commit the Simanim to memory step by step, by the end I have a map of the entire Masechta as a whole. And unfortunately for many people when they go through learning, even on the Mishnayos level, they do one parak and then the next parak and the next parak. And by the time they get to parak Gimel, parak Aleph is faded away somewhat. And by the time they get to, in our case here, the 8th parak, then you've already sort of, everything else is started to blurred. And this way, with the Simanim, you have the entire snapshot of the Masechta, so you can start to relate to all the material as a whole and start to connect the dots between prakim and understand what goes together and how to use things. So your learning is facilitated dramatically as a result, because now you can use the whole Masechta, not just see it as a whole, but you can use the entire Masechta as a whole. And I want to say that one of the big pain points, the things that gets in the way of really productive learning, is when you know you've learned something prior that's relevant to what you're learning right now, but you can't remember where it is. So not only can you not find it easily on your own, but it actually creates pain. Ugh, I learned something, I forgot it. Ugh, and now that brings that pain and frustration into your learning right now, which is a real pain because you don't want to forget what you're learning. So, and then your learning could have been, taken to the next level if you could remember it. So having the Masechta as a whole at your fingertips in this type of format, which is very, very manageable, is fantastic. So that's the third benefit. You get to hold on to and see the Masechta as a whole. And the fourth benefit of Simanim is it gives you an additional way to do chazara on a lot of material. Because one thing we'll talk about in other sessions is different types of chazara. But many people think that unless they're doing everything inside, word after word after word after word, that's the only chazara they're familiar with. And they know themselves that, hey, this is just not going to happen over time. I just can't keep reviewing everything I've ever learned inside easily. They can, but they can't be done easily. And then over time, they just let go of prior learning to focus on what they're focusing on right now. But by having Simanim, it gives you another way to hold on to the material in the interim. So as before you do Chazara of Yuma, let's say on the inside, you have the Simanim and the pace of Simanim. And we'll talk more about how-tos, but the general pace of Simanim takes usually a second to recite each Siman once you have it down. So in Maseches Brachas, our starting Zrayim is there's 57 Mishnayos in the Masechta, which means that it would take less than a minute to review the topics of what's in the Masechta and keep the snapshot in our mind's eye. The great thing about Simanim is the more you do Chazara in the inside of the Masechta, the more you'll remember from the Simin itself. So I'm not saying, hey, you got these words, you've got the Masechta all in your hands. No, you've got the keys to the Masechta in your hands. You've got the organization of the Masechta clear in your mind's eye. You have a way of accessing all the material very easily because you've made it very clear and efficient to do review. So you've got all that, and coupled with doing review on the inside, every time you review one Mishnah that you have a Simin for, then more material sticks to the Simin. So take the Simanim on the most kind of superficial level, but you use that as keys to hold on to material on the deeper level by going through the Mishnayos on the inside, and you've got a remarkable combination, and you'll be amazed how much you can accomplish. Think about it. 1 minute to review all of Maseches Brachas and Simanim. There's a lot of minutes in the day that probably you could fit, one chazor and two chazors, or as we added up, the more Masechtas and Sidarim in that time. So they're very, very, very powerful. Let's just do a little review of the benefits. Benefit number one, they give you a filing system. So instead of your learning ending up in the fuzzy sphere of our brain where everything's cluttered and not easily accessible, now you have a file. So if you think about something, I gave it a file, it'll tap you into the learning there. Secondly, it helps you organize your learning and break things down. Because often when you're in the thick of the, a Gemara or Mishnah inside, it's hard to pull out and get clarity. But by having the Simanim, it helps you kind of see the big picture out of each Mishnah and then organize it further, the parak. It helps you see and understand the Masechta as a whole and have access to all the material so that you can use the entire Masechta no matter where you are with ease instead of with frustration and not using it. And finally, it gives you an additional way to review a lot of material in a short amount of time, which makes our chazors much more efficient as we wait to do the chazors on the inside. Again, this is not Simanim without chazor on the inside. And I will tell you, Simanim without a chazor on the inside, they'll become meaningless because you have to know the material on the inside. But if you have it with the chazor on the inside, you'll be amazed what the outcome is, and you get a much greater output in your learning. So that's our introduction to Simanim. We'll have another session in terms of the how-tos and how to maximize the benefit of each Simin and things to be aware of so you don't make common mistakes that people do when they start out in Simanim. Okay, so thanks for joining. Time for Mishna and our session on how to remember your learning with the specific focus on Simanim.